So this happened quite a few years back. My dad was still driving his golf cart, going to his therapy sessions he could get to from the community, driving himself to activities at their 55 plus community. And one morning, it was, I think, 5:30. My mother went to the door. There were policemen at her door. And she's like, and they had my dad. And they're like, "Is this your husband?" So he had been found with his golf cart. There's a side kind of narrow, windy road next to their community, kind of a back entrance. And he was found kind of on the side of the road. Um, and, you're not supposed to drive golf carts out of the community. And he didn't have lights on his golf cart. It was dark. It was early in the morning. Somehow he had missed his turn and wound up going through the woods. And they determined, I guess, I don't know if he told them he had Parkinson's. He was not, in fact, drunk. They could have cited him for driving the golf cart on this road. Yet I think they were happy to get him home safely. And so my mom told me the story, and my dad wasn't very concerned. He didn't see what a big deal it was. Yet,
And he was trying to go to Wendy's too. Was his
yeah, he was
at
he was
5:30 in the morning.
heading to Wendy's, where he would go. There was a back entrance out of the neighborhood. You could get to the shopping center. There was a Wendy's there. His occupational therapist was in a building there. He'd go get Wendy's. He'd go to his therapy appointments. So this is when he could still get around pretty good. And he had some cognitive deficits, but we thought he was still okay driving his golf cart. And so he didn't think this was a big deal. And my mom tells me the story. And of course, she was alarmed, a policeman coming to her door, and just his safety. I mean, he could have gotten in an accident, he could have been hit easily. Um, he could have overturned the golf cart in the woods. So many different things could have happened. And concerned about his safety and concerned about him being able to drive this golf cart himself. And at the time, he was working with his occupational therapist, a wonderful man. Yet my dad had wanted to return to driving a car because he hadn't been doing that. And so his therapist had done the skills that you need to pass the driver's things like your reaction time and some different things that play into safety with driving when you're talking about brain injury, dementia, cognitive impairment, as well as physically responding and reacting. And my dad thought he was making progress toward this. And so now we have this dilemma. Is he safe to still drive his golf cart? And I had some conversations with his therapist, and the frustrating thing was everyone was encouraging him, like, if you practice, and you're doing so great for someone with Parkinson's and you're passing these tests. And so he had this false hope. And here we are going, "Oh my goodness, I don't think you should be driving a golf cart." And I was going to go out with him and see how his driving was. And yet, it came to the point where we realized, he was no longer safe to drive the golf cart.
Well, hello, this is Don.
And this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family. And today, this is podcast number 150. And we're talking about important conversations to have with your parents. And
And before we get to that, we'll do our little tip for the day. We're trying to infiltrate that into our podcast. And today's tip again comes from Caregiver 101 by Mike Collins. He writes a whole book on different 101 caregiving tips that you can do for a caregiver. So this is tip number 34, and it's look for downtime, even small chunks of time when the chaos of caregiving slows down and can be used to accomplish tasks, rest, or pamper yourself. While the care recipient is taking a short nap, you can pay bills or have a cup of coffee. While you're waiting in a doctor's office, you can read an article you've saved, do a relaxation exercise, or go for a short walk or shop.
these tips sound so much like tips for new mothers. There's
Yeah.
such an overlap here when you're caring for someone, the time intensity of caring for someone, whether it's a young child or someone with special needs or an aging loved one, someone who needs supervision, who needs your physical assistance to do tasks, who needs supervision due to cognitive, either impairment or just not yet development, when you're talking a young child or someone with developmental disabilities.
I mean, it's one that fits really, can be one to come for everybody in a way to just take time, just, with life being so busy. But yeah, you agree with the small child. I remember having to kind of slow you down at times with our children to just take it easy a little bit.
Nap when they nap and take
Yeah.
time for yourself, read a book. As a parent now of a teen who's not yet driving on her own, we spend time driving places, driving to appointments, driving to school. And so there's this sitting in the car time. And if you're taking a loved one to the doctor's office, you might have some downtime in that way, even if you're sitting there in the waiting room. What can you bring with you? Can you bring your planner book? Can you bring something you enjoy, a book to read, or um, if you have a hobby or something you enjoy, if you knit or crochet, can you bring that with you?
Well, nowadays with our phones, I take the time to wipe out some old messages and clear out some of that too. So there's that option too.
And it's also good to find other things away from our phone. We can be so attached to
Yeah.
what we need to take care of. But yeah, I mean, our email is portable with us, so it's something we can do no matter where we are.
So what's with our conversations we need to have with our
So
seniors?
I found some interesting articles. One is 7 conversations to have. So just things that are important to talk about as your parents get older. And
Well, we talk about this all the time. The earlier you have that conversation, the earlier, the better it can be to help them in the future.
before I get into those different areas of conversation, there's another article, and I'll go into this later, but it talks about the 40-70 rule. It says for the most part, someone who's 40 typically has a parent about 70. And so these are the people who are looking at, having conversations with your parents and doing so before disaster strikes, before there's a strong need, before something happens, because a lot of times these things don't happen until one of your parents dies. And now you're looking at caring for the other one, or someone goes in the hospital or something happens. So what kinds of things are important to talk about? The first one on this list is advance directives and living wills. So what is an advance directive? This document assigns medical power of attorney to an individual. So there's medical power of attorney, and there's also um, legal power of attorney. So sometimes it's called healthcare power of attorney. So in the event that the person becomes incapacitated to make decisions for themselves on medical issues, right? A lot of times we think about the financial issues, but this is specifically for medical. And so then the person is designated to be able to help with that. A living will is a document outlining your desires and wishes for end of life care. And it's more specific than, being resuscitated or not. It looks at things such as, do you want to be on a feeding tube? You want to go to dialysis? What measures do you want and do you not want taken? And so that's something to kind of re-examine. Someone might decide at 70 that they want all the measures, and then they develop some health complications. Um, and now it's like, okay, do I want to go through all that? And it's important to really get your loved one's opinions. And these are conversations that can be good to have earlier, and even just starting that, down the road, in this situation, what is it you'd really want? And opening that up.
And taking your time too, because not all conversations with seniors want to be talked about right off the bat, or
Sure.
so it might be a slow, gradual getting to that place.
And to jump to this other article I found, it's how to have these conversations, 10 tips. And one of them I've already mentioned is starting early. So talking about these things before, doing so proactively. It'll make it much easier in the difficult times if you have some thoughts laid out. Maybe they're willing to write about it. Maybe you can give them a booklet of these areas. Um, Write down some prompts, to get their ideas on it. Maybe they're willing to do that, or at least converse with their spouse about it. But having someone else they trust included in these thoughts. It mentions practicing patience, being open minded, being able to really listen to them as you're navigating these conversations. Um,
Well, one place you might this is a thought, but might want to start is, the kids handed to me some years ago, or was it? I'm trying to think if it was before that. The little booklet that asks all kinds of questions that you answer along the way,
so
and it's
that's
a
more of a memory of.
yeah, but I mean it's this beginning place that you can start this kind of conversation with by starting with that and then developing into bigger conversations along the way might be an idea.
um, Other areas to talk about wills and estate planning, trusts, making sure there is a power of attorney in place. And on that note, finances. We may or may not know our parents' situation and their finances. And again, as we're aging, we need to have these own conversations with ourselves and with our partners or spouses or maybe our grown children. We need to figure these things out at a young as age as possible because you never know what can happen. And you're put in that situation. And now all of a sudden, what happens? I've learned a lot as my mother navigated my father's death and looking at court and probate. And I've learned some key pointers that if you have finance resources in the name, Don or Gina, if one thing happens to one of us, then the other one automatically takes over that account. If it's and now it's in this other person's name, and then you have to go through probate and court to get that money or those things taken care of. And so there's little tips and tricks out there. So talking to a financial planner, talking to an attorney who is versed in these conversations and knowing about these documents. Um, the other thing is knowing about their bills, how they pay their bills. Are they doing it on paper? Are they doing it
Mm.
online? And do you have access?
Mm.
We experienced this when Don was in the hospital, and after his heart attack, he had a stroke, and he was having trouble with his language, and he wanted to access some information on his computer, and he couldn't remember the passwords and to be able to access this information. And so it was a challenge. And we realized that I need to know how to access these things. And you have this master password programmed on, what's it called?
It's oh my, you asked me that. Well, actually, I have it right. It's right up
And
here.
so it's a place
It's a
that
place that
stores all your passwords, but you,
it's under Zoho.
so,
The and what's neat about it now, I just realized this recently that um, when I get onto a website that I want to have, and there's a login there, if I open my account, more than likely it'll be right at the top of the thing, and it'll automatically open it for me. So it's anyway,
but you need to know how to get into Zoho. And
so,
so this was the problem is
yeah,
didn't recall the password to access that and everything else was locked up behind this. I use Apple passwords. Everything is connected across my Apple devices. Takes my fingerprint or a code to access that. And so I find that much more user friendly. Excuse me.
got a
Um,
little problem still with their cold playing into it today here, so
I'm
have
recovering
to
from the flu.
yes. And no, it's a good idea to have that conversation and talk about that.
Um, Yeah, looking at debts that they may have. And these things, sometimes people keep these secret. One spouse may even have secrets from the other. And so kind of opening up the idea, who are they willing to talk to? How, can you have a list of documents? I remember my parents giving me a list of um,
They did.
information and to be able to access things and knowing where things are at. And I believe my sister may have done the same. She does not have children of her own. Um, Other important conversations to be had, excuse me, as I turn my
He's
paper.
got the reports.
Is it time to give up the car keys? So, as I told in the
Ah,
starting story with this, looking at things that are going on physically, a lot of people with diabetes have what's called diabetic neuropathy. And that means they're losing feeling in their feet and legs. And if you don't have good feeling in your feet and legs, managing pedals
yeah.
in the car is a safety hazard. If you maybe have restrictions with your motion in your neck and back and you can't turn your head, that's also um, a big safety issue. Another very common thing is vision. Macular degeneration can happen with aging people. It's very common over 80. Glaucoma. And there are other visual conditions that can be progressive over time that affect someone's ability to, I'm going to get them mixed up now. One of them affects your peripheral vision and one of them affects your central vision. I think glaucoma is your peripheral and macular is your central vision. And so being able to see on the road, we really rely on our peripheral vision quite a bit when we're driving. And I remember when my dad did driver testing with an occupational therapist, at one point, like he really had no peripheral vision pretty much. I mean, and when you can't see what's going on the side of you,
Hey,
it's a safety hazard. Things happen quickly on the road, and maybe you can get from A to B if there's nobody else on the road. But, it's anticipating those things that could happen and people making mistakes out there on the road and
instantly too. I mean,
animal running out in the
yeah.
road, a child, yeah, making quick decisions, your reaction time on that. So, and then you talk about cognitive issues, memory. You hear stories all the time. People with dementia get lost.
Hmm.
They're driving, they forget where they're going. They can't recall where they're supposed to go, let alone complications with making decisions in the car. It's 2025 and there are so many options beyond taking a taxi to get where you need to go. There's Uber and Lyft. There's also senior transportation services. You need to look in the area where you live and see if these services are available, and often discounted or that provide special transportation if someone needs in a wheelchair to be able to get where they need to go. So finding these things out ahead of time before
Yeah.
they're needed. And maybe you're in the middle of it and you still can be researching these things and looking at options. That way, it's not just you can't drive anymore. It's, hey, I think it would be safer if,
Yes.
let's look at these different options as far as getting where you need to go. How could we do this in a safer way? And we've talked in other podcasts about the big deal of giving up car keys and safety with driving. And the next area is it normal memory loss or is there something more concerning going on? So I've had
Oh,
numerous friends, reach out to me. I'm concerned about my parent. This is what I'm seeing. I don't know if there's cognitive, excuse me,
taking a quick coffee break here.
not coffee.
Oh, tea break. Tea break.
Um, so, what do you know about cognitive impairment?
Are you talking to me? The cognitive loss side of you. Uh,
So, um, what are early signs of dementia? Things to be on the lookout for: missing a bill payment, missing medications, um, some forgetfulness can be common, and yet on occasion, right? Someone doing something consistently, there was likely something deeper going on. We don't need to assume that because you're older, you're going to have memory issues. It's really not part of normal aging.
Well, and we tend to kind of joke about it,
Mhm.
and so there's got to be a place where you stop the joke and make sure that it's a real thing. Um,
Recalling people's names. I mean, there can be things that
yeah,
can
we
be more common as we get older. But looking at dementia and mild cognitive impairment. So, Don, do you know the difference between the two?
say it again. What do you?
Mild cognitive impairment versus dementia.
Um, no, I do not.
So they talk about this if anyone's watched the TV series This Is Us. So This Is Us is this family. Uh, it's a TV show about family and generations, and it covers it spans the time period and does not do so chronologically of a young couple when they meet to when they're old and aging. Um, and the later versions, the mother has diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. So this is early memory concerns, and they might have difficulty focusing, completing routine tasks, coming up with the right words during conversations. They often can function independently with a set routine and familiar environment. Um, but it's good to pay attention to this and have this evaluated because this can turn into something more. It can be the early stages of dementia.
So what can you kind of put that in simple terms of what's the what would be the difference or
Um, it's mild.
so
it's
it's just
it,
losing things here, somewhat here and there kind of thing
um,
versus
well, it's more it's memory loss and challenges that are beyond what's considered normal for your age. And so there's assessments that can be done. Um, there's some assessments I do in the occupational therapy world with aging population that looks at it's sort of a severity scale. You know, if it reaches this point, it's more than just a mild cognitive impairment. Some people could have a mild cognitive impairment that kind of remains in that stage, versus dementia is going to be progressive. Um,
well, would you consider what I went through with my cognitive abilities where I lost some and then gained back? Is that
well, you had a stroke, so you had language, you had cognitive,
yeah.
you had neurological changes in your brain that affected your cognition. And because it was from a stroke, you had brain recovery after the fact. And so you are much more prone, though, to having vascular dementia because of that. So there are already changes that have happened in your brain that are affecting the function of your cognitive skills. And I
Well, that
know,
makes me feel better.
and just like we can exercise our muscles, we can exercise our brain. And as you know, the therapy and the activities that you did after the stroke helped to recover that function in the brain.
Yeah.
We've learned that the brain continues to be plastic throughout our lifespan, meaning it can rewire and adapt. And so keeping that active, engaging in new tasks, engaging in puzzles and challenging activities, um, whenever you have to learn something new, doing something different, a new type of puzzle, it's helping to make new connections in the brain. So, yeah, it's important to have those kind of activities going on. And yeah, there's differences in someone who's had a stroke versus a mild cognitive impairment. And there are so many different types of dementia, which is something I think we've covered and we'll cover more at some point,
I think
looking
so.
at, there are, and that's where it's so important to have a neurologist, to have someone specializes in this area. In the greater Charlotte area, there's the Memory and Movement Center. And so they work with people not only with Alzheimer's and other types of dementia, but also Parkinson's, which may or may not have a dementia component. And, there's even more types out there. But memory impairments can affect your daily life. Um, and so someone with a mild cognitive impairment, they might forget or do something, making a simple mistake, but if it's interfering with their function,
Mm.
then we've got something more serious here. We're not taking our medicines as prescribed. We're unable to, even a familiar task, turning the stove off consistently, um,
Not consistently, though.
um, being able to speak and write and communicate your judgment, your decision making, like in the example of my father. He made this choice to take the golf cart out early and then turned through the woods and was on this road. He wasn't making good decisions. His problem solving, his awareness of safety hazards. You can also see mood and personality changes. So it's important to talk to a professional, find someone. And if you're not happy with the person you've met with, a doctor they've gone to, seek other resources, find out, go into support group meetings for dementia, reaching out to agencies. You can find other specialists who specialize in these areas.
One of the sites I was on yesterday had community grants on it that you could find that can help you. I want to say it was the Parkinson's,
Mhm.
one of the Parkinson's websites talked about what grants you can find. And I know your mom found some of them, and there's probably even more in there that you can. And the more we learn about this, the better you can do at getting more of those for yourself. Because
Yeah, the grants can be pay for caregiver.
yeah, because
Um,
this time finances become an important part, and so whatever you can do to help out.
so another big conversation to have is discussing living arrangements. And I want to jump into the well, maybe not, the tips for how to have these conversations. But discussing with your loved ones, in the event that you're not able to take care of yourself, in the event that physically you can't get in and out of your house, you can't negotiate, or cognitively you can't make meals for yourself and or the decisions, having that conversation with your parents, what might they want to do, what situation might what would they maybe feel more comfortable with? Are there friends? Are there family members? Do they have the financial resources looking at facilities? It's a process to apply for Medicaid, but someone without the financial resources to pay on their own, um, applying for Medicaid to have those services to pay for them to live either a nursing home or assisted living situation where they have people caring for them, finding out what places are available in your area. And the other big thing is asking your loved one, in the event they can't continue to live in their home or where they're living, do they want to stay in the city that they're living in, or is there somewhere else? Maybe you're the only child, but maybe they have some sisters or some cousins or other people that have more time and availability as much as you want to maybe keep them near you. Maybe there is a better place, a better situation, and getting their input on it is so important. And again, whenever these conversations can happen earlier.
Well, and I think the one thing we probably should have started out with saying is, not all parents want to talk about this, and
Hmm.
so there's a couple different things you can start at. One is going to it slowly,
Yes.
talking about it slowly, but you can also add into this factor that, I know this is not a comfortable thing for you to talk about dad or mom or whomever you're talking with, but what I'd like to be able to try to do is have you involved in the conversation before you get to a place where you can't.
Hmm.
And so being able to start out by talking about that it's important for you to be in here and give me your thoughts. so that I don't have to wait till a day when you don't have the thoughts.
Right. It talks about being patient, starting early, but also choosing the right place to have these
Mm,
conversations. So setting yourself up for success. Where might they be feel most comfortable talking about this? Um, you know, trying to introduce certain topics in a private setting, and a place where they feel relaxed and comfortable. Kind of having some ideas ahead of time of what you'd like to talk about so that you can keep your conversation on track, and being aware that this might need to happen in stages
mhm,
and having patience for that. Doing your homework ahead of time, having some resources, having some suggestions and information ahead of time, and also involving siblings and other close family members. Having this conversation with them can
mhm,
be really important beforehand. And again, it goes down to the person's best interest. What do they feel would be best for this loved one? A lot of people maybe want to keep their family member at home, but it may reach a point where that's no longer, a safe option. It's taking a toll on the other person who's caring for them, or there's other concerns going on. So it could change over time, and kind of talking this through ahead of time um, can really make a difference, because I see all the time working in short-term rehab, all of a sudden their loved one has fallen, they've broken a leg, and now they're not walking safely on their own anymore, even as they're making progress, or they've had a stroke, or something else has befallen them that the family's concerned. What are we going to do? How are we going to um, help make the choices? We're concerned about them. They insist on they want to stay home alone. And one big factor really is that financial component. That can be a big
mhm.
stumbling block. If you have the financial resources, you can hire someone to come in your home. You can pay to go to the best facilities. So some other pointers this article talks about is leading with empathy. So they give some suggestions. I respect that this is difficult. Let's make sure we can set this up to plan for the way you would like it to go. Um, Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. I can imagine this might be hard, but we can get through this together. Let's sort the details out now so we have a plan in place. Having something fun. Maybe, you're going to sit down and talk, and then you're going to go to the spa with your mom, or you're going to go out, take them out to eat, or you're going to get to do something enjoyable, making this a positive experience. And letting them know, mom or dad, I want to make sure you're taken care of in the same way that, you've cared for me. Or want to make sure you're taken care of
Depends on the family.
in a way, um, that can benefit you, and knowing these things ahead of time. Because if something happens, in the event that you're not able to communicate your wants and desires and needs, knowing ahead of time some things in place. Um, and then it talks about really listening.
Yes.
And this is such a big thing, right? What does it mean to really listen, Don?
Well, one, shutting this up, but not letting yourself go on deciding what your next thoughts are going to be, being able to give that up and be able to let yourself really listen instead of worrying about what's the next thought that you're going to have to answer their questions. Because the mind's, I think, is quick enough that even if you let that go, it'll catch up with you even afterwards. So, you can decide on what you can decide on what you want to talk about, but if you're not listening, then you're not really hearing what they're saying, and you really want to get that in
And you can
first.
have a plan for your conversation, yet it might lead a different direction than you expected.
You might want to take notes too for yourself so that you don't have to think about it. You have it there when you're ready for it so that you can open up and listen to the other person talking.
And like I said, being willing to go down a different path.
Yeah.
Maybe you're bringing the issue up, but they really are worried about something else. And being there and supporting them with where they're at. can go a long way in helping make decisions down the road, even if you've had a contentious relationship with your parent, or maybe not much of a relationship, or didn't communicate very effectively in the past. Setting this up for success, taking the time now to listen. And it points out some questions to consider as they're sharing with you. Are they masking anger or fear? They might do so in a way being judgmental or harsh, or but is there something else underlying going on? Do they have regrets? Are there unmet goals, things that they wanted to achieve that they said that they hope to? So thinking that, there's other things going on with them and we have to take a step back. So we need to be in a space, a headspace, to have the time for these conversations and not be in a hurry with it, and to stop and really work on your listening skills.
Yeah, not have your own thoughts being, well, like I said, writing those thoughts down doesn't hurt, but not having them up here so you can really listen to what they're trying to say is, I think, important.
And having someone you can vent with about, you might have these difficult conversations, and then you have a sibling or someone, a close friend, who you can, this is very frustrating, I'm dealing with this, and having a resource for an outlet for yourself, because it can just be really aggravating. I belong to some online communities about caring for aging loved ones, and sometimes people get on there and just want to vent, like, I'm done, this is what I'm dealing with, I'm frustrated, I'm tired. And sometimes, just that opportunity to event. These other notes, it just talks about taking notes, getting other outside help, whether it's legal help from attorneys. There are people who specialize in senior care when it comes to that financial and legal aspects. Um, and just thinking about your language when you're talking with them, avoiding pressure of, you got to make this decision now, or I'm going to make it for you. Thinking about the ways you're approaching them with the conversation, and letting go of your own resentments. Maybe you have a lot of resentments growing up, but okay,
Mm.
here you are now. If you're in this position to assist them, how do you want it to go? Do you want to maintain those resentments that are going to affect your life even more so, maybe, than theirs, as far as helping them to navigate this changing period in their life? There are people who age in place. There are people who maintain cognitive function. People are still driving at the age of 90, people who are still doing the things they need to do. I meet these people all the time, and they're still have the resources to take care of themselves. And so it's not inevitable that your loved one is going to need help, yet it's likely that there could be a time where that, even if it's temporary, that they need some help, or someone recovering, say, from a broken leg. Maybe they'll recover enough to get back to what they were doing, but having kind of plan B in place, and again, the sooner you can have these conversations before you're in a dire situation. And so, kind of to recap, we've talked about different conversations to have with your parents and effective communication techniques to have. Again, just to recap, talking about wills, estate planning, finances, advanced directives, living arrangements, medication management, looking at memory loss. Is it mild cognitive impairment? Is it dementia? And then the points with having these conversations: starting early, exercising patience, choosing the right setting conditions for these conversations, not only for them, but for yourself, doing your homework ahead of time, involving siblings or other close family members, because doing this completely on your own
Ugh.
can be draining and exhausting. Leading with empathy, really listening to them, avoiding pressure, getting outside help, and, like you mentioned, Don, taking notes.
Yeah, and start out slow. Know that this is not what's that the saying
It's
about
not a
this?
sprint, it's a
Yeah,
marathon.
yeah. And I think we're still, even though as we get into the senior years, we think our time is getting slow or slowing down or somehow, but it can still take time, and you want to be able to be there in a loving place for them and listen to them. So. So that's our podcast for today. We hope you enjoyed it. We would love to hear from you. We'd love for comments. We'd love to know what's the next thing you would like to understand about growing older or changing in the family. Um, if you're on one of the podcasts, you want to subscribe to the podcast. We'd love that too. You can find out more about what Gina and I do, the consulting that Gina does with the aging loved ones. You can also find out. I do my EFT sessions every month, two times a month. My next one's January 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And you can also find us on Facebook at Focus Healthy Family, Instagram, Focus Healthy Family 1, YouTube at Focus Healthy Family. You can join us every Thursday for when our podcast comes out. And you can find all of this out by going to www.focusedhealthyfamily.com. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.